retreat. And so this would be a tall ask if Donald Trump's expectation is to really start these peace talks right away. It's difficult to see how this surge in funding and support could make a really big difference by January 20th. Of course, Trump said he would solve the Ukraine-Russia issue, bring peace to that war on day one. Day one is January 20th. So they're doing what they can. The idea here is really to put Ukraine in the best position possible once Donald Trump takes office, forces those talks to take place so that Ukraine doesn't have to give up too much in terms of territory, and ideally that Ukraine would not have to make a promise that it will never join NATO, which is certainly something that Russia wants in order to get a peace deal.
Dave Keating there. Now, as for Joe Biden himself, well, he's currently on a tour of Angola, the first visit there by a US president. This designed to promote Washington's hefty modern investments in the sub-Saharan African nation. A centerpiece of his trip showcasing the US commitment to $3 billion to the Lobito Corridor. It's a huge railway project that links Zambia, Congo and Angola. Keris Garland reports.
It's the first time a US president has set foot in Angola. Greeted by his Angolan counterpart João Lourenço and an enthusiastic delegation, Joe Biden belatedly fulfilled a promise he made when he became president to visit Africa.
I hope he brings solutions to the problems we face in the country, and that they'll benefit society, notably the youth. We hope he'll bring new political strategies to the country.
The aim of the visit is to boost the Lobito Corridor, a train link supported by the United States and the European Union, which intends to transport minerals to the Angolan port of Lobito on the Atlantic coast and counter China's ambitions in the region.
Presently, most of the critical mineral resources and the strategic minerals are exported out of the eastern side of Africa, mostly through Dar es Salaam, into China and Asia.
It will be Joe Biden's only official visit to Africa as president, and it comes at a controversial end to his sole term in office, with the pardon he granted at the weekend to his son Hunter. And on the flight to Luanda, Biden was careful to avoid the journalists on board.
Israel saying it has struck dozens of Hezbollah targets across Lebanon. Israel's military saying that it attacked a terrorist cell in Lebanon's Aqaba village in Bekaa province, just coming into us. It's despite, though, of course, the ceasefire which came into effect last week. At least 11 people killed on Monday alone. Hezbollah also admitting it has fired rockets into Israel, launching an attack on an Israeli position. No casualties on the Israeli side reported.
These residents in southern Lebanon are arranging for proper funerals for those killed during hostilities with Israel. But as families took the bodies to their hometowns, even more people died on Monday, with both Hezbollah and Israel accusing each other of violating the truce. According to Lebanese authorities, there were several deadly Israeli airstrikes, including in the villages of Haris and Talouseh in the south. Israel said it targeted Hezbollah fighters, infrastructure and rocket launchers. It came shortly after the militant group said it attacked an Israeli army position in the disputed part of the border area between the two countries after what it called repeated violations of the deal by Israel. The Israelis, meanwhile, said Monday's strikes were in response to Hezbollah's hostile activity and called for fighters to move north of the Litani River.
I want to emphasize Israel is committed to the successful implementation of the ceasefire, but we will not accept a return to the situation as it stood on October 6, 2023.
The US, who's responsible for monitoring and implementing the deal along with France, has played down these latest attacks and said the ceasefire has been broadly successful.
We've not seen the ceasefire breakdown. When we get reports of potential violations, we have a mechanism that we put in place with the government of France to look at those potential violations, determine if they are in fact violations, and then engage with the parties to ensure that they aren't repeated.
Under the ceasefire deal, Hezbollah has 60 days to withdraw its fighters and infrastructure from southern Lebanon, while Israeli troops are also to pull back to their side of the border during the same time.
Video footage taken by a rebel fighter in Syria appears to show insurgents entering a palace believed to belong to the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in Aleppo. The video is said to have been filmed on Sunday, showing them exploring several grand reception rooms before climbing the marble staircase to investigate the bedrooms and bathrooms. It comes after Syrian rebels at the end of last week seized most of the largest city of Aleppo, as well as dozens of nearby towns and villages, as part of a lightning offensive against the forces of President Bashar al-Assad. Now, today is the 30th anniversary of the launch of Sony's first ever PlayStation video. Now, since then, it has, of course, been a huge, even colossal consumer hit. And yet, 3 decades ago, its creator really struggled to convince both game makers and his bosses at Sony as well that his console would even be a winner. He says simply, looking back, that everyone told him he would fail. Keris Garland reports.
Its iconic startup chime is just one of the many things gamers will remember about Sony's original PlayStation. The grey console took the world by storm when it first hit shelves on December 3rd, 1994, with more than 102 million sold worldwide. This French YouTuber, who has collected almost every title released for the PlayStation in Europe, says the console was a revolution.
Avec cette console, je disais, il y a des expériences.
With this console, there are experiences, sensations that we discovered that we'd never had before. To be scared in Resident Evil, but really scared, like watching a horror film. To feel, well, it was already possible with racing games, but to have that feeling in 3D, it was closer to what you had in real life.
En 3D, ça se rapprochait plus de ce qu'on avait dans la vie réelle.
Helping to launch franchises like Resident Evil and Tomb Raider, Sony courted a young adult audience. This broadened the appeal of a pastime that had often been dismissed as a hobby for children. From a hardware standpoint, the CD-ROM also proved to be a game changer. The technology was cheaper and could store much more data than cartridges used by competitors like Nintendo. 30 years on, some analysts are predicting that cloud gaming will soon render consoles obsolete. And despite laying off hundreds of workers in its PlayStation division in February, the Japanese company recently launched an upgraded version of its PS5, highlighting new AI features. But the PS2 still holds the title of the most successful console in history, having sold more than 160 million units.
Now then, Donald Trump has announced that he will attend this weekend's reopening of the restored Notre Dame Cathedral here in Paris. It will be his first trip abroad as US President-elect. Trump making the announcement on his social media, saying it will be an honour to attend. Notre Dame, of course, ravaged by fire back in 2019, but set to welcome visitors and worshippers again this weekend for the first time, with dozens of world leaders expected among the guests. Joe Biden is also going to attend, and already a massive security operation is swinging into force. You have been warned if you are going to be in Paris by any chance over the weekend. It's probably going to be a little bit chaotic, I suspect, but very impressive images they will be. Of course, we'll have coverage of that opening here on France 24 as well. Good to have you with us then. You're watching The World Today.
Were targeted. The numbers of casualties was incredibly very high. 20 Palestinians were confirmed injured, while 8 others were confirmed killed, according to medical sources in Kamal Adwan Hospital. But the vast majority of Beit Lahia Beit Lahia town have been receiving evacuation orders by Israeli military, saying that you are no longer allowed to stay in that area, and they have dropped leaflets for civilians there entitled to be the collapse of Jabalia. They are reminding citizens in Beit Lahia that you will come to face and to meet the same end of Jabalia, which had collapsed based on the Israeli claims. But also in the past hour, Jabalia town has been under relentless attacks. Initial reports confirmed the killing of 2 civilians after being directly targeted by an Israeli drone, with no sign of a slowing of what's happening in the north so far, Tom.
And Tarek, yet again, the US, Qatar, Turkey and Egypt are pushing for a ceasefire. At the same time, France and the UK is pushing Israel to come up with a winter humanitarian plan in Gaza. I mean, what's the feeling there, though, that this is just more talk and there's going to be little action coming from this?
Well, unlike the negotiations that took place to reach a deal between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon, efforts here for the Gaza Strip have been quite complicated by some significant sticking points, including hostages and even the Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. Israel sees that the return and the release of hostages will be a domestic victory, while Hamas may see that the release of hostages will be a sort of a bargaining chip to extract concessions, including prisoner exchanges, ceasefire terms, and even easing the ongoing blockade. Now, mediators are working to bridge the gaps between both parts on the ground, but till now, what has been overwhelming is that the American President-elect Donald Trump starkly warning both parts to immediately release hostages and even to de-escalate the situation before he is officially be inaugurated and takes his office. But we're waiting for further fruitful outcomes from what's going on in Cairo. So everyone here pray for the end and for the day that they can hear the announcement of the cessation of hostilities and the end of this staggering conflicts on the ground.
Okay, thank you so much, Tarek. Tarek Abu Azum for us there in Dar al-Bala. Kamal Adwan Hospital in northern Gaza is barely able to function because of repeated Israeli attacks. Last week, the director of the hospital's intensive care unit was killed in an Israeli strike. But volunteer doctors are keeping its services going. Moath Al-Khalut went to meet them.
A group of specialized Indonesian doctors arrived to Kamal Adwan hospitals to support their colleagues from the Palestinian doctors who stay at Kamal Adwan hospital. And let's get inside the operation department to talk to Dr. Dina. How could you describe the situation? How dire the situation here at Kamal Adwan hospital?
In Kamal Adwan, there is a lack of medical staff, of course. There is only young doctor, and especially there is no surgeon, only GP and one resident, and they have to take care a lot of patients. So there's really lack in medical supply and medical staff. And I believe that hospital supposed to be a very safe place, yeah. But I think Kamal Adwan is the most dangerous hospital.
So the Israeli army forced them to leave their luggage, their personal stuff, and come here to the Kamal Adwan hospital. They spent months of waiting to enter to the northern Gaza Strip. They described the situation here and told us there is a severe shortage of medical supplies, medical staff, and every surgical tools. Moath Al-Khalut, Al Jazeera, Kamal Adwan, Palestine.
The Lebanese Health Ministry says at least 9 people have been killed in a series of Israeli airstrikes on 2 southern towns. Israel's army says it's retaliating after Hezbollah launched rockets for the first time since a ceasefire was agreed. The armed group fired missiles into an area called Mount Dov in Sheba Farms that is occupied by Israel. Well, Zaina Hodab joins us live now from Beirut. And Zaina, after yesterday's violations, can you just explain where the ceasefire actually stands right now?
Well, neither side has declared the ceasefire dead, but it remains fragile. Now, it is largely holding in the sense that it put a halt to Israel's wide-scale bombardments across Lebanon that we witnessed over the past few weeks. But Israel continues to carry out strikes in Lebanon. A short while ago, the Israeli military, saying it hit, quote, a terrorist cell in the east of the country, that's in the Bekaa area. And it's not just in Lebanon. Israel is hitting in neighboring Syria too. They hit a car on the road to Damascus International Airport. Israel believes that this is not a violation of the truce, that it is acting in self-defense, that it is taking out what it is calling threats emanating from Hezbollah. But Hezbollah and Lebanon see the situation differently, and that's why Hezbollah, for the first time on Monday, fired rockets across the border. They didn't cause any casualties, but Hezbollah said that this was an initial defensive warning so that Israel will stop its violations in Lebanon. And Hezbollah carried out the attack after the United States and France, members of the committee that's supposed to monitor and implement the ceasefire, accused Israel of violating the truce. The situation is Israel feels it has the upper hand. It's acting with little restraint. Hezbollah wants this to change. It needs to impose some sort of a deterrence. But if Hezbollah fires yet more rockets across the border, it could risk widening this conflict, reigniting this conflict, and the tens of thousands of people have already made their way to their homes only to find devastating villages and in a very desperate situation. So the situation is fragile, but that ceasefire is largely holding.
As we know, there are many conditions that have been put on this. Can you just tell us more about the implementation of those in regards to the ceasefire? What actually needs to be done in the days and weeks ahead?
Stop fighting.
Well, the ceasefire came into force on November the 27th. 60 days after that, since coming into force, there's 60 days where there's supposed to be a transition of power in southern Lebanon. What is supposed to happen is that Israeli troops who remain along the border area, they are supposed to gradually withdraw, and the Lebanese army is supposed to send in thousands of troops, and Hezbollah is supposed to pull back. And the Lebanese army is also supposed to dismantle any military infrastructure in that area which does not belong to the state. So the army is supposed to do what it was supposed to do back in 2006 following the last major war. This has yet to happen. Now, the U.S. envoy, Amos Hochstein, told the Israelis to give time for the monitoring mechanism to start working because this requires some time. So, you see, both sides really understand the deal differently. Hezbollah says that it will cooperate with the army, but it believes that this deal is focused on south of the Litani. Israel believes it is just not south of the Litani, but across the Lebanese territory.
Okay, thank you so much for all of that. That's Anna Hodder for us there in Beirut. Well, for more on this, we're joined now by Yossi Beilin, who is a former Israeli justice minister and initiator of the Oslo peace process in the early 1990s. He joins us now from Tel Aviv. Thank you so much for being with us once again, sir. First of all, the UN says that Israel has violated the ceasefire with Lebanon at least 100 times since it went into effect a week ago. Can you just give us an idea of how tenuous it feels in Israel right now?
Well, I heard carefully the reportage of your reporter, and I think that generally speaking, this is the truth. I mean, it's like always. There are different interpretations of the same agreement, and the good thing is that there is a third party which is able to say, hey, you made a mistake here, you did something wrong according to the agreement, so you have to change your behavior. And I believe that it is just the beginning of ceasefire. Hopefully, it will continue in a different way, while each side will understand exactly what are the limits.
Yeah, will Israel actually listen to that third party, though, and take on board if it is finding all these violations to the ceasefire?
Well, the violations are on both sides, you know. It's like always, it is a kindergarten, as you know. So you have a teacher, and the teacher may say to this guy, hey, you made a mistake, come back to the kindergarten or whatever, and they will behave. This is not a major issue. The major issue is the fact that eventually the parties agreed to have a ceasefire. They did not stick to their original promises that there will be a kind of a security area or whatever. They had to compromise. Both of them had to compromise. Now they will have to compromise on the implementation.
What compromises do you think that Israel would be willing to make if that does happen?